What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another webinar where today we're going to be breaking down indices, gold, and then we can also break down GJ as well. Now, to start off with gold on the daily time frame, we've actually had a pretty big move to the downside the last few days. We had a big push down, but ultimately it closed very weak, and then a following push down. So right now, this is an area that you have to be careful with on gold. For those of you guys that do trade gold, 1644.500, let's almost call it, is an area of support and resistance here on the 4-hour time frame, where we have resistance, we have support, and now price is continuing to hold this area of support as well. Right now, price is kind of stuck in between these two areas, is kind of how I see it. So if you were to look to continue to sell gold with this overall bearish trend, as you guys could see, price is making lower lows and lower highs. Realistically, there's only really two things that I personally would look out for. Right now, I would look out for a pullback back into the 1660 range, where you could then look to short it back down into 1644. Or if you guys trade a lower time frame, what I would actually do is wait for a break of 1644, potentially a retest, and then you could look to go short from there back down into the 1627 range. Ultimately, if you see a bearish engulfing here on the 4-hour time frame, that shows signs of a continuation to the downside, and price is now trading under support. More importantly, before you look to actually short gold, you want to see that price is trading under support, wait for price to establish resistance, and then look to short it back down into this 1628 range. If that doesn't happen, then just wait for a pullback into this 1660 range is kind of what I would look out for here on gold. Now, I haven't seen GJ in quite some time, but one thing that we did talk about is if we did see price actually hold this break and retest on 162.500, which it did so perfectly, and price moved with CPI all the way past our initial target of 163, which is crazy. Then you can continue to actually expect buys here on GJ. Now, GJ is actually approaching major resistance at 168, and I would continue to expect price to push up into the 168 range, which from there you can make the decision on now whether you want to sell. Realistically, again, if you're looking to sell at 168, all you have to do is wait for some rejection confirmation, which could be in the signs of like just a simple rejection candlestick, or if you want to be a little bit more conservative, you could look for some type of a variation pattern or an engulfing. But honestly, I don't really see GJ holding this 168 level as resistance. We're going to have to wait and see when price is actually there. But I actually do see GJ potentially breaking above this area and possibly even going higher. If we look at this market structure on the daily, we have a high, higher low, higher high. So as of right now, structure is bullish, but we'd have to wait and see what happens at this 168 range. Now, looking for more of like a short-term type of position, we have previous resistance all throughout this area right here, which is currently holding as support. So if you're somebody that's looking to buy GJ, this is not an area where you would want to look to buy. The area you'd want to look to buy GJ would be this area right here, 165,500, which again is support. And if price does pull the way back down to support by London session, you could look to buy GJ all the way back up until 168 and then wait and see what happens there. Because we don't know if price is going to reject. We don't know if price is actually going to hold. Obviously, if price breaks above this 168 area and we're starting to trade at like 169, then you could wait for a retest of 168, wait and see if support is actually established at 168, and then probably even look to trade it up into the 170 range, which would actually be crazy. That's kind of what I would wait for on GJ from an intraday perspective. Wait for it pull back into 165,500 and wait and see if this area of support continues to hold the support, which would create good buying opportunity for you to buy it back up into 167, 150, which is the current highs, or 168. Now, if GJ does drop below 165, 400, then we could see a pretty big drop back down to 164, 500, possibly, maybe even 162, 163 again. That's if price breaks 165, 500. Now, obviously, if price breaks 165, 500, you don't immediately just want to wait and take the sell position, because a lot of times what can happen is you have a steeper pullback, which is a fake out, and then price pump up into the upside, which is kind of why we wait for these break and retest setup patterns to actually form. So in a situation where if GJ actually breaks under support, then you'd want to wait for it to simply retest previous support, establish that it holds as resistance, and then that would create good selling opportunity. Now, indices are a little bit different because the NASDAQ compared to like US 30 is trading a lot lower. So realistically, what I'm looking at here on the NASDAQ would be on the daily time frame. We've actually had a continued move to the downside. Prices actually rejected this area of structure, which is our kind of our previous daily low here. We've had a clean rejection and prices now trading towards the downside, which we can definitely expect NAS to continue to actually trade lower back down into 10,500, which would be my projected area. That's kind of from a long-term perspective look on it. Now, when we talk about where we could possibly look to short, there's two areas I'd be interested in shorting at. Based off the 4-hour time frame, I would actually like to look to sell somewhere along this 10,850 range. This is our previous area of support here on the 4-hour and daily time frame. This is also our previous daily low. And from this area, we can actually look to sell NAS back down into the 10,500 range, which would be a huge move. Now, more from an intraday perspective, as long as NAS can kind of maintain under this previous area of support, and if this area of previous support can hold as resistance, then you could possibly even sell it from this point to 10,500. I wouldn't take shorts now. Obviously, I'll wait and see what the New York session looks like. But if the New York session is roughly trading somewhere in this zone here where there is liquidity, then you could potentially look to sell it back down to 10,500. Now, if price breaks above the zone, which is, let's call it 10,760 to about 10,730, then you can expect NAS to easily come up into 10,850, which you could then also look to short it here. Anything above that, I would actually wait to continue to short NAS, because then we may see a bigger move up and a steeper pullback. But these are the two areas that I would be looking to short, and that's kind of my game plan going into this next trading day. Now, when it comes down to the US 30, US 30 is a little bit different because US 30 actually did give us some form of a double top here at our previous area of structure, which it was very interesting to see CPI push price all the way down into the lows and then pump price all the way up into the highs, which was kind of crazy. This could have created good selling opportunity for you guys that were trading after the CPI report did come out. And ultimately, we did see a big move to the downside. Now, this 29,700 area is a major area of resistance within this 4-hour time frame here because of the rejection that we had here a few weeks ago. And now it seems like price is kind of consolidating around this area, and this area is holding as newfound support. So obviously, with this area holding as newfound support, this is not an area that I would consider to look to continue to sell. I would continue to look to sell with this bigger picture time frame being the daily time frame, just because this market structure is still holding as lower lows and lower highs. Ultimately, we have a low, lower high, low, a high here. Now price is kind of trading in the middle. So if you look left, you can easily see that there is structure all throughout this entire range here, which you could ultimately look to continue to short this range. And what we can expect over the next few days is for price to continue to go down. But ultimately, we have to ask ourselves the question is, okay, well, if we're expecting price to continue to trade lower and we can expect continued shorts, it's like, where could we possibly look to short at? Well, this is an area, like I said again, of previous resistance that right now is holding as support. So it's kind of like if the market actually does open up and we see price starting to trade back under this area could be the area of resistance that you would want to set your stops above, right? I wouldn't say it's necessary for you to set your stop loss way up here in the 30,000 range, but you could definitely look for a position where you set your stop loss above the recent structure high and then look to target maybe this area of consolidation down here where there is resistance. But if price continues to actually trade higher, then we can look at this internal market structure on this intraday time frame being the hour time frame, maybe something along this area here to possibly look to short again, which would be 29,900. Why? Because we have ultimately support here and we have support here. And there's a reason why this price range ended up holding as support twice in the span of different weeks, right? So this could be an area where we could look for US 30 to also hold as future resistance. Obviously, if price breaks above that, then you want to wait and see what US 30 actually does inside of this zone right here, which ultimately we've seen the biggest rejections out of this zone here. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for US 30, the NASDAQ. And then again, that's the breakdown on gold and GJ. I would actually tread with caution in the beginning of this week because obviously decisions are going to be made. And like I said, again, with this daily and 4-hour time frame where US 30 is currently trading at is not really an area I'd be too comfortable at least as of right now, of going shorts, because obviously things could change by New York session. What can happen is price actually pump down, and then we have market structure where we have essentially a high, a lower low, a lower high, and then a lower low. And that would be a little bit of a different story. At that point in time, I would wait and see if this area continues to hold as resistance, and then wait and see what price kind of does from there. Now, does anybody have any questions on kind of what I've just discussed?
Raul, could you please go over gold? I kind of came in late.
Basically, you could look to sell at 1660 or wait for a break and retest of 1644 to sell it back down into the next lows.
Hey, Raul, can you go over GJ for me, please? I got in late as well. My apologies.
I mean, what I basically covered with GJ is that you can wait for a retest of 165,500 to look to buy it up into 166,900 or 168. If price breaks 165,500, wait for a break and retest to sell it back down, possibly back into 163.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Just a quick summary. Anybody have any other questions?
Did you go over SPX by any chance or NAS? I'm sorry, dude. My computer was not loading that soon.
Oh, yeah, I did.
Okay.
Anybody else have any other questions or anything that they would like me to discuss or cover?
Could you go over GU?
Sorry, go on.
My bad.
The thing with GU currently where it's trading at, I mean, the daily is obviously in a bearish trend. We did break above this 21 SMA, which could show us that price can have the possibility of recovering and continue to go up. Thing is, on the 4-hour time frame, we've broken above this market structure area. So at this point in time, you're kind of like in the middle of no man's land. So I'd wait and see if GU could come back into these lows, give you some form of a retest. We could look for a double bottom and then look to take price into the highs.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When do you, as far as like the SMA goes, when do you consider it over price action, if that makes sense?
Never. I would never consider the SMAs over price action. Remember, the SMA is just a laggy indicator. All it simply tells me is when price on the daily time frame is trading above, we could possibly look for buys.
Okay, but what do you prioritize a higher time frame over the lower time frames when it comes to the SMA?
Of course.
Because oftentimes, okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Because on the lower time frames, I mean, the SMAs are always going to be switching back and forth versus on the 4-hour or the daily time frame, it could be a little bit more concrete.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you could just even see here with GU, the entire time it went bearish, and this is the 4-hour time frame. Price continued to actually trade lower. The entire time it was under. Now, once it started to trade above, like in this area here, is when you actually saw price kind of go long there. Same thing that's kind of like what's happening over here. Maintained under this entire time. Then once it actually started to break above, it started to trade above. Then is when we saw a move to the upside, and now GU's back above it. So we could definitely see a continued move to the upside with GU.
Raul, will this be uploaded to the day trading institution straight away?
I mean, it depends on how long it takes to render. Because if it takes a few hours to render, then probably not. But sometimes it'll take like 20 minutes to render, and then I'll upload it right away.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Why the last one's not up on the course?
No. That's not it. I was just wondering.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Raul, is there a schedule with the webinars anymore?
Every time I ever try and do webinar, it'll be around this time. 8 to 9 o'clock is when I typically tend to start to do the webinars. I haven't done as many webinars recently just because I've been very busy working on a few other projects that I've been doing.
Okay, but I know the time, but as far as days, like when you're not busy, do you know what days it could be?
Days will always be Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like trading profits aren't linear, but do you ever have like a set goal in mind, like how much you want to make for the week, or you just taking what the market gives you?
Not really. I always just try and take what the market gives me, because one thing that I've learned about trading over the last few years is how much you're going to make is always going to be unpredictable, right? The only thing that's always ever determined on in the markets is how much you're going to potentially lose. And even then you still have a slight percentage that you're going to lose more than anticipated just because you don't know how you're going to emotionally react when price does come to your stop loss area. If you're somebody that uses mental stop losses, then you don't know if you really have the discipline to close at that stop loss because it's like, okay, well, I plan on losing $1,000, but now that you're at an $1,000 net unrealized loss, it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe I'll be fine losing 1,500. And then you could slowly start to increase your stop loss, making your loss bigger and bigger and bigger, right? But those are things that are unplanned when you first start trading versus somebody that may use a hard stop loss, say, okay, I'm guaranteed losing this $1,000 loss, right? And then some people eventually price comes to their stop and they have no problem letting the stop loss hit their position, while others are like, you know what, I'm going to give this another chance, and they move it up. Typically, that also comes with inexperience is when you continue to make your loss bigger, right? So that's why I say there's like that slight percentage chance that you could possibly lose more than you anticipate. But one thing for sure is you'll never know how much you'll make. Like when I had my $170,000 day on US30, I wasn't anticipating on making $100,000 I was anticipating on making maybe a quarter of that, half of that. Right. But it just so happened that the market just continued to go and go and go. And that's what ultimately it led to, So I just kind of always go with what the market gives me. In terms of like me setting a goal for my trading, I always just try and make double what I'm risking on average.
Right.
Yeah, which that shows in my profit factor.
Yeah. I mean, so go on, man.
It's good, bro.
I was wondering, like back in the day, like 4 years ago, when you were trading like XRP and profiting like around $850 to $1,500, how much was in your trading account?
Like 20 grand.
20.
Yeah, like 20 grand.
Hey, Raul, for support and resistance zones, do you mainly look at the wicks or the closings, or it depends?
I mean, the thing about like, I consider support and resistance to be like my more intraday levels, right? Versus my supply and demand levels are more like areas based off the daily time frame. So I always try and generalize a specific price zone. So it won't always be like, all right, it's 30,000, but typically like I try and take both into consideration when setting up, the zone that I'm looking at, realistically, like we only have these horizontal lines placed on our screen to alert us when price is at a certain point where we may see a pivot in price action, right? Just because price comes up to my line and hits it doesn't mean that it's going to reverse right then and there right away. There may be times where it does, there may be other times where it may consolidate around that area, possibly even go higher before actually rejecting that area, and that's kind of like, I don't want to say it's like what happened here, but it's kind of very, very similar.
Thank you.
Yep. Anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, last one from me. I'm trying to get in the habit of letting my winners run. So now like I'll put in a stop loss always, but I'll put in like alerts where I have my TP so that I can monitor it. But one thing I'm not confused about, one thing I'm wondering is you're paying attention to momentum to decide whether to let your winners run. But is that on like let's say you're trading GJ, is that on like a 5 minute, or are you waiting for an hourly closure or a 30-minute closure? Because you might see, let's say, price retracing on like a 5-minute time frame, generally speaking, and you might get out, but then the hour closes with full momentum. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, the thing about trading like a lower time frame, like a 5 or 15 minute, you can't anticipate your moves to be absolutely massive just simply because of all the fluctuation that you see on the 5 or 15-minute time frame. Because it's like if I'm trading a 5-minute time frame and I'm looking at GJ here, right? This looks like it's a pretty long stretch away. If I'm buying right here, typically my targets are going to be maybe around this area right here. Ultimately, that's not a very, very large move compared to like if you're trading an hour time frame where it's going to take hours to actually play out. It's like, okay, well, I have a bigger understanding of what we could see or where we could see the market potentially travel to, and I can make that identification that, hey, If we reject this previous area of resistance where there's support, we can come up into this area, which will require a bigger stop loss size, but also increase your target at the same time. So if I'm trading an hour or a 30-minute time frame, then typically I'm going to try and maintain within that hour or 30-minute time frame, just because I could see the 5-minute time frame, like it did here, pull back as much as it wants to, but ultimately what's going to be more important is that hour close. Look at how far price pulled back here on both hours here, and then ultimately it continued to go up. So if you're trading like a 30-minute, then I will try and maintain on that 30-minute time frame. If you're trading a 5-minute, then obviously you'd want to use like the 5-minute and possibly even the 1 minute to your advantage. But typically the people that are trading the 5 and the 15-minute don't anticipate to hold trades for hours on end.
Okay, thank you, bro.
Yeah.
Yo, what's good? You see how on the 4 hour this 167 area is getting like respected nicely also in September.
Yep.
I was gonna ask you if one of these 4 hour candles, if GJ continues with bullish momentum and it breaks above, would you take buys on a retest of that 167 area? If you like, I would take it with a pin bar or a doji.
I mean, yeah, you can
target 168.
Yeah, you can. You definitely can. You could look to take buys from this point to this point. I would just kind of analyze the possible risk to reward on that position, because if the risk to reward doesn't make sense, then I wouldn't take it.
Yeah, for me, it would just depend on the wick it leaves, like what the risk to reward could be.
Yeah. I just, that's really all you'd have to wait for then, is just kind of wait for that break and the retest of 167. Let's kind of call it here and see if that actually does happen. Because the questions you got to ask yourself are, well, if price breaks above, taps into 168, then comes back down into here, is that something I'd be comfortable buying? Because this could just be a bunch of areas where sellers are coming into the market, and the 4 hour time frame may have a huge rejection already. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we can even see sells from this point in time. But if you see like a normal break and a retest, then you can expect price to come back up into that area. Like the situations are ultimately different. The time frames also do. You also got to keep the time frames in mind as well. That's kind of the only thing I'll have to say. The risk to reward makes sense, and the trade setup is there, and then you go for it.
Yeah, I feel you with these trades when it's trending nicely. I like to, and also when there's a range like there is now on the lower time frame, I would wait for the 4 hour close above, and then wait for any entry signal on the 15, 30, or 1 hour, and then take it if it's a 1 to 2 or higher.
Yeah, sure. If it works for you, it works for you.
All right, thank you, bro.
Hero,
Yeah.
man, what's the lowest time frame in which you will look for a break of structure to find a pullback?
I mean, it depends.
Depends. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. If I'm taking the 4 hour trend into consideration, then ultimately, I'm just staying on the 4 hour time frame and looking at what the 4 hour time frame is doing.
Okay.
Yo, why does your SMA change colors? Is that just the 20?
There's just a 21 SMA. I don't know why it changes colors. I literally just went onto indicators and put and selected on the first SMA that popped up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Raul.
Yep.
I was wondering, do you use pending orders when you trade on like CPI news?
No, I don't. Just because your orders can get slipped. I mean, they can get slipped with market execution orders regardless, but I don't really use like pending orders or anything, because I believe this was CPI right here. I mean, are you talking about like a buy stop, a sell stop, a limit order?
Yeah.
No,
like in order to like catch that move, because I noticed that happened like in seconds. So
yeah, literally. No, I don't.
you just use market execution?
Yeah, I use market execution orders. But I've only traded CPI like once, maybe.
Like last month, right?
Yeah, I traded CPI. Last month I traded when Powell spoke. So that was one, and then I did trade CPI as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Hey, Raul, can you go over the trades you took last week? If that's
I
all right.
traded last week. I traded maybe like once or twice, but that was about it. Yeah, I'm not really trading as of right now.
Cool.
I may trade this week. I'm not sure. It just depends on my workload with everything else that I got going on. But when I feel like I have a lot of projects and I have a lot of things to get done with those projects, I tend not to trade. So I feel like I don't make irrational or illogical decisions when it comes to trading. Because when I find personally, I don't know about everybody else, if you own other businesses, or you have like a regular 9 to 5, when I have a lot of other things going on, it kind of takes a lot of focus away from my trading, and I typically tend to lose more. So, I don't try and trade as much, but if things ease up for the rest of the week, then I'll probably hop back on and start trading. Because I like to give trading my full 100% focus and attention. And I feel like if I can't do that, then I just simply decide to stay away.
Raul, I missed the beginning. Would you mind just going over GJ again? What you're thinking for the week?
For the week, I can't tell you what's going to happen, but what I could tell you with current price action is if price breaks 165,500, wait for the retest to look to sell it. If price comes down into 165,500 and rejects, look to buy it back up until 167 or 168.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can we take sales from the current area? Because you see those 4-hour rejections at the orange area on GJ where your orange line is. Can we take sales back into 165,500?
You could, but I would just kind of be concerned with the volume that we saw from the last week. I don't know if this volume is going to continue to hold. Also, notice that there wasn't much of like a rejection based off of the last trading week. So that tells me that there's definitely a lot of buyers and buyers are trying to continue to push price higher. So that's something I would be a lot more caution with. If you want to do it, I mean, go for it. I don't see anything wrong with it. It's just personally, I would rather wait to look to try and continue this trend. And if we're going to see sells, I'd rather wait for the extra confirmation, which will be the break and the retest of this structure.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Hey, Raul, from personal experience, is there any difference in liquidity and slippage when it comes to, let's say, a 50K or 100K compared to a 400K account on a funded?
On a funded, typically you shouldn't see slippage because that's why people connect demo accounts to the live accounts to avoid slippage. But the problem with that also is like there's latency between when you place a trade on your demo account for it to be reflected onto your live account if that company decides to back you with real capital. Let's say that company just decides that long term you're not a profitable trader and you're literally just trading demo, then you're going to have no problem. But if the company sees that you're actually a profitable trader and they back you by real capital and your money is connected to liquidity, that specific funded account that you're trading is connected to liquidity, then you may see a few differences in your price in between the bid and ask from when you enter. Like let's say I were to take a trade at GJ at 166, right? I may actually be executed at 166, 100, right? And that's where you'll see like the difference in your payout. But you shouldn't really see too much slippage or anything along those lines on funded accounts, at least.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, you'll typically see slippage and things along those lines with live accounts, and that's only when you're trading heavy position sizes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yo, now going into November, if the volume is just like way too annoyingly slow, will you just stop until next year?
I plan on. I mean, I low key, I already did stop trading. I don't know if I'm gonna trade. But as you're approaching like Thanksgiving, you'll see momentum definitely slow down, and then December there's just gonna typically be low momentum, low volume. At least that is. That's kind of what I've noticed over the last 6 years of trading. So if you want to continue trading until like around Thanksgiving, you can. But honestly, I wouldn't expect like crazy big moves. It also depends on what type of news releases comes out, you know?
Yeah, low key, it already feels like it's starting to be on and off. You feel me? I don't know.
Yeah, quarter three is well, at least the end of quarter three is gonna be like that. I mean, like even with like NAS, like all of this consolidation anticipating or approaching CPI was so annoying to actually trade in. You know what I mean? I mean, you had moves up, you had moves down. Ultimately, it was just consolidation until CPI came out. Then we saw some real moves in the market, which this makes it very difficult to actually trade,
Yeah.
From past experience, Raul, when it came to this quarter, if we're trying to pass a challenge, would you recommend just not doing that at all and waiting for January or February, or
You can go
any strategy you will use during this time to pass upon it?
Not really. I would just focus on shorter term trades to get in and out of the market so you don't get stuck in consolidation. I've passed challenges before and got my funded credentials ready to go for January when you see volume pick back up.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Bro, can you break down gold?
What?
Can you do gold?
I mean, I already broke down gold. I'll give you a brief explanation of what I'm looking for, but you could just wait for the recording if you want to see like the full detailed explanation. Gold is trending bearish, so I'd continue to look to sell. I would wait to sell at 164 or 1660, or break and retest of 1644 to look to sell.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Hey Raul, so are you still gonna be sending signals since you stopped trading, or are you gonna limit those?
I don't even send signals to begin with. I haven't sent signals like all year. Yep. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yo, I got a question.
Yeah.
So if you traded US 30 on the 13th, what would have been in your entry?
Say it again.
If you traded US 30 on the 13th, what would have been your entry?
It was 30, the 13th. So here. 1 second. Are you talking about for CPI?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't really say exactly what my entry would have been. One thing that I would have definitely looked at is that this is resistance here. So I would have waited for resistance to be rejected, and depending on what the news report came out to be as, in which in this situation, it came out negative. It's kind of hard to say because I don't know if I would have waited for an entry right at the release. For example, like a liquidity grab, like let's say the news report came out to be higher than expected and we see price go up, then I'd be like, okay, well, this is just a liquidity grab. I'm going to start slowly averaging into this position here by taking very small position sizes on the way up, and then, hopefully look for US 30 to flip back over and continue to go down. That's kind of what I would have done here. I don't know if I would have just kind of entered a sell right off the bat, right when this candlestick closed. Like if there wouldn't have been a CPI report to come out right after this 30-minute time frame, right, then I would have definitely taken sells at this candlestick closure for sure. But it's kind of hard to say like exactly how I would have traded this news because again, like right now, like I'm not even trading to begin with. So to put myself in that mindset where it's like, okay, I'm going to risk money. How much am I going to risk, et cetera, et cetera? Where do I want to get in at is very different. But ultimately, just going based off of structure, we have resistance up there, support down here. I would have looked to sell from this point to this point, and if price breaks this point, obviously sell from this support to the next support, which would be down here. Kind of like how I always trade, basically. Does anybody else have any other questions? Is everybody good?
Did
Did you change the color of your SVJ when you got it, or is that the original color?
You're talking about this one, the one I have right now. This
Yeah.
is the second one. No, it's a stock color.
Oh, okay. So you had two.
Yeah, this is my second SVJ. My first one was gloss black from factory. Then I wrapped it satin black. But it's funny because after I sold the SVJ, I'm friends with the owner of my previous SVJ. Everybody kept thinking that was still my SVJ. So they would literally stop him wherever he's at and be like, "Yo, that's Raul's SVJ, right?" And he said, "No, like I bought this one, right?" And he ended up wrapping it because so many people were telling him that.
Okay. Yeah, the color scheme was nice on that one too.
Yeah, I'm kind of a little bit bored on the color scheme that I have right now on my current SVJ, so I'm thinking about changing it up a bit. Thanks. Anybody else have any other questions? So everybody like good to go. I take that as everybody's good.
Thank you, Raul.
Yeah, of course, no problem.